I am Lorna Grossman. I'm the Quality Assurance Coordinator for the Safeguarding Unit in St Helens and also the Safeguarding Partnership Board. So my role is to do multi-agency audit and analysis as well as monitor our performance data. I was responsible for helping with the actual completion of the audit framework, so I provided technical support and caring support to the people who were completing the audit. I also am the Deputy Chair of our Harmful Sexual Behaviour Implementation Task and Finish Group, and I sit on our steering group. So we started out with a clear idea of what we wanted to achieve, which was a representative sample across all of our partner agencies, so we had a full understanding of what was happening regards to harmful sexual behaviour with our agencies in St Helens. For us, we have a large number of schools and a large number of primary care trusts, as well as our other voluntary faith organisations, community organisations and nurseries, as well as those other organisations. So we ensured that we had a clear idea of what a representative sample of each of those would be. So for our schools, we chose every third school. For our primary care, we had them put together an audit group. And for nurseries and voluntary sector, we had representative agencies for that as well. Then from there, we gave them 4 weeks to complete the audit. We gave them a phone call at the midpoint. So 2 weeks in, we rang around every agency who was completing to ask how they were getting on, what support they needed, if there was anything else that they needed from us. And we provided all of those things during the course of the audit, and then we collated all the information at the end of the 4 weeks. And then we pulled all of our agencies back in to share the findings and ask them to help us determine what our next steps were going to be, to put in our priority actions and make sure that we got the critical parts straight away. A lot of the questions that were asked about support were in terms of what things meant, what they were to do if they felt a question wasn't relevant for them. In some cases, it was about definitions of what the words were. And we gave them the best answers that we could in terms of this is what we're looking for, this is what we're hoping to achieve. There are no wrong answers. There are the answers that you give us. And if you give us something that we don't quite understand, we'll come back and we'll ask a follow-up question. If you don't understand why something is relevant to you, you can explain that, and that's also learning. For us, we can then say if there's something that we need to do further development work or further awareness raising. We pulled together a group of people to look at the findings. So we brought every audit tool together and we looked at them in terms of the scores that they gave, and then we self-assessed within the group what we thought that the response was based on the narrative and based on the information that we had about what the agency was doing. What we also had was, because we were working with the NSPCC, we used the STAR tool, which does an awful lot of the data work for you. Data is my job and I do like a spot of analysis, but I'm aware that not everybody enjoys that. So if you have someone who can do all of the data work for you, then again, it's about using your resources, using your people in the place where they're doing best. But if you don't, then the STAR tool is available and that does an awful lot of the hard work. So we did have one of our sectors that scored themselves much lower than we'd expected, and we went back and we asked the question because the narrative information didn't line up. What we found was that they were asking, or they were scoring themselves very low because they were asking for information from other teams and not getting the level of reassurance back that they needed. So while they did have good practice in place, they didn't feel confident that it was good enough, and so they were scoring themselves lower because they really didn't feel comfortable in the work that they were doing. So we now have a multi-agency harmful sexual behaviour protocol that's available to all of our agencies so that they have a very clear idea what HSB is, what they need to do with it when it's recognised, and how they can support our young people when they see it. As part of that, we're using the Brook traffic light tool, so all of our agencies have access to the Brook tool and are able to use it to identify harmful sexual behaviour, and then they know where they're going with it once it's identified. And we have preliminary data coming in that suggests that we do have an increase in identification of harmful sexual behaviour, but we don't have a corresponding lack of confidence in our workforce, because our workforce feels confident that they're doing the right thing. So for us, the first one was to make sure that we had a sample of data that we were able to manage. So if we had required every school, every GP practice, and everyone who works with children to complete the harmful sexual behaviour framework audit tool, we would have ended up with upwards of 300 toolkit responses, which is not something that we had the capacity to manage. So we looked at representative samples within what we were capable of using to analyse, so we didn't end up with too much information. So for us, we did a 4-week from our launch event up until the completion of the audit, so that everyone had exactly 4 weeks. What that gives you is enough time for reflective practice and to get your ideas together, get your answers together, consult with other departments if need be, but it doesn't make it so that it's so far away into the distance that you forget about it and you leave it to the last minute because all of your other more urgent work is piling up in front of you. Use your biggest resource as much as you possibly can. Our biggest resource was the people that we had working across the authority. We've got hundreds of people who work with children, and what we found were that there were some great strengths and we wanted to use them as much as possible. So we involved them from the beginning in the launch event. We invited them, we showed them exactly why it was important. We involved them during the audit process. We would go out and visit, and then at the end we brought everyone back together to give them all of the audit findings and to involve them in what we did next. Once we had done that, we completed the action plan so that we had an idea of what it was that we were doing, and we pulled together a multi-agency implementation group so that it continued to give our professionals the idea that they are absolutely intrinsic to the process. They were essentially involved, and we needed their support and them to take messages back into their agencies so that we have a very, very wide approach to harmful sexual behaviour.